Another episode of The Bad Batch is out, and it's everything we could have hoped for. As per usual, there will be spoilers for the episode in this video, so if you haven't seen it yet, go do so. That's an order, trooper. This week, we were graced with yet another episode on Ryloth, a follow-up that progressed into another great episode with tons of character development and something some of us might have thought was a little unexpected: the betrayal of Captain Howzer and his men. Although we all thought Captain Howzer looked like a badass that seemed to resist becoming a cookie-cutter Imperial dick last episode, I'm sure none of us really expected him to outright betray the Empire, and even more than that, convince some of his own men to do as well, all with the prospect of certain imprisonment and even death. That leads us to the question: was this an anomaly? It's so out of the left field for any clone to defect, let alone regs, so we'll be taking a look at it in depth in today's video.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Now, we've done a full-fledged video on our theories about inhibitor chips in the Bad Batch before, so we won't go over this point in detail, but essentially, we made the bold claim that inhibitor chips weren't something that completely overrode a clone's personality. As per the name, it was meant to inhibit a clone's personality, which usually wasn't that tough of a job, seeing as a lot of clones were certified NPCs. In many cases, inhibitor chips worked perfectly, suppressing any remnants of compassion and the emotional bonds the clones might have had with their planet and non-clone leaders, while also amplifying the one trait that all clones were meant to be inherently programmed with: obedience. However, in today's episode, as well as the last episode, we witnessed the short character arc of Captain Howzer. From the outset, I think we all knew this guy was a protagonist. He had one of the freshest cuts we've ever seen on a clone, and just an all-round badass look that screamed, "I'm not an NPC." Couple this with his remarks at the start of the last episode to Cham Syndulla before he addressed his people, and I think we all thought he was one of the few good clones that somehow hadn't gone too far to the deep end after Order 66. The episode showed constant glances of concern when Cham or his family were threatened, and he seemed extremely reluctant to follow orders in certain instances. After the episode, many of us were left with a renewed sense of hope for clones, and probably thought that Captain Howzer, even though he would probably end up succumbing to his orders, was a refreshing reminder of how individual and awesome clones could actually be, taking us back to how Captain Rex was for us Clone Wars boomers when we first started watching. Fast forwarding back to today's episode, and we were greeted with even more character development for Howzer. As the episode went on, we kept getting small clues as to what Howzer's true intentions were. He was under a lot of pressure from Admiral Rampart, and you'd be forgiven for thinking he would eventually crack and become just another clone. Howzer held out, however, to the point of dangerousness where he was openly questioning Rampart's orders. By then, it was clear that he'd made his mind up. As the episode reached a critical juncture, it was, of course, Captain Howzer who saved the day. Not only that, he also had such a strong belief in his men that he decided to stay and address them right after the Bad Batch escaped and left Crosshair fuming. It was during this scene that one of the most surprising things in the episode, and in fact the whole of the Clone Wars franchise, took place. Howzer somehow managed to convince several of his men to lay down their arms, meaning they actively disobeyed their orders. But how could this have happened? By all conventional logic and the knowledge we have on inhibitor chips, this shouldn't have happened. None of Howzer's men should have laid down their arms and joined their brother, in theory. What's often overlooked is that the Kaminoans specifically programmed the inhibitor chip with the intention of them being used to kill as many Jedi as possible with as little margin for error as possible. This, of course, didn't mean that there'd be no error. As seen with a whole bunch of clones we labeled defective clones in a really old inhibitor chip video we made, their unique brain chemistry actually allowed them to resist the effects of the inhibitor chips. We have our suspicions on whether Howzer was one of those defective clones, however we're not sure how he acted during the execution of Order 66, or if there was a Jedi even stationed with him on Ryloth. But we'll get back to Howzer in a minute. First, we've got to explain why we think the clones he was addressing laid down their arms. Once again, referencing our recent video on inhibitor chips, clones' personalities, emotional bonds, and tendencies No matter how small the distribution of these were between clones due to Kaminoan engineering, were still all present. What this means is that although the clones all still generally had the same rigid structure in their brain pathways, they still reacted differently to certain experiences and relationships they had formed during battle with their brothers. There's no amount of genome engineering that the Kaminoans could do to completely eliminate these small variables, and it was likely the Kaminoans thought there was no need anyway. After all, their main purpose was to kill the Jedi, and the inhibitor chip would surely be more than enough for that. However, it was a completely different scenario for the clones addressed by Howzer. They had shared meals, stories, and most importantly, the loss of their other brothers at the hands of the Separatists, all in the name of defending Ryloth and its people. Unlike many other clones, however, Hauser and his men also seem to have developed strong emotional attachments to the Twi'leks, whom they saw as capable warriors. These factors, combined with the gravity of the speech made by your seasoned captain who you have nothing but respect for, pretty much makes it that no inhibitor chip or orders can override what you felt during all those years of gritty fighting for a cause you believed in. This clone POV of the ones who did put down their weapons are likely very similar to the ones who didn't. They would have likely felt very similar emotions to their brothers who laid down arms during that speech. However, their emotional paradigm would have been totally different, likely viewing the imperial occupation of Ryloth as a continuation of their hard work during all those years. But what about Captain Hauser himself? Once again, there's a real possibility Hauser could have been our defective clone archetype. However, we can't be certain of this due to not knowing his background. What was very interesting, however, and something that made him different to a lot of other clones, even good ones, was that he had a genuine attachment to the Twi'leks he fought alongside. We only knew of one other clone who was like this, and that was Commander Gree. Gree, as we know though, was given the unfortunate task of trying to kill Yoda and didn't make it out alive, which is a shame because if he were alive, it would have been interesting to see how he reacted to the Wookiees being brutalized by the Empire. Our opinion is that Hauser was very similar to Gree. He was compassionate toward the alien life whose planet he fought on, and most importantly, respected them as soldiers. What this all hints to is that if Hauser wasn't in fact defective, he could literally have just been a lucky version of Gree, meaning that he did in fact execute Order 66 when it was issued and either killed his Jedi with his men or had no Jedi stationed with him to kill. Taking all of this into account, as well as the connection Captain Hauser formed with his men and the timing and power of his speech, the active treason of him and his clones could be one of the biggest anomalies to occur throughout the regular clone army. A perfect storm that resulted in the Bad Batch escaping Crosshair's grasp once again. So guys, that's our look at how Captain Hauser and his men disobeyed their orders and betrayed the Empire. But what do you think is going to happen to him and his men in Imperial custody? How does Hauser rank on your list of favorite clones now? Let us know all that and more in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.